I'm Drew Breezy, and this is the Comm Center. We're going to use our collective credible experience to analyze a compelling older Las Vegas area 911 call that came from an officer in obvious distress. It's not the kind that you're used to, but unfortunately, it's all too familiar. As we honor the fallen during this National Police Week, John and I are going to pay our respects and hopefully prevent some more from falling. I'm actually going to read you an excerpt from the book that I never wrote. And in our new segment called Boil Drew's Blood, John and I will read YouTube comments, and an overlay of my blood pressure readings will determine how long the bit will last, or maybe how long I will last. All that and what it means for your weekend on the Comm Center.
City council members have announced their plan to disband the Minneapolis Police Department.
We're calling for defunding the police.
Shootings in New York City have more than doubled this year.
That is literally my favorite song. Welcome to the Comm Center with Drew Breezy. It's a TV show on the internet about two best friends who go out to play a game of disc golf and encounter a haughty, medium-sized plover with chakra-shattering prophecies that ultimately totally imply the ultimate imminent shitstorm of all time. I'm John. I'm an active 911 dispatcher in the field. That's right, taking 911 calls, hot, cold, and ready to order whenever you want, 40 hours a week. I'm joined, as always, by Drew Breezy, also known as Lieutenant Andrew Baxter of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. He has 29 years in his position there as various police type things. He joins me now as a podcaster who talks about stuff with expertise. Drew, how the heck are you doing?
Yeah, my chakras seem to be in order right now.
We will put an end to that.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna disrupt that. Yeah, I'm doing okay. I mean, I mentioned it was police week, so we definitely want to honor the fallen. And we got a pretty heavy topic, but John, we ought to let them in on the fact that this is this is not probably the most prepared for episode we've ever done, but I think it's going to turn out to be our most fruitful.
You and I shine when we're not prepared. You and I have had it before where we will sit down and have multiple rap sessions about what we're going to do, or we sit here, plan it out, we get out the whiteboard, and then we go out there and it's static, right? Like it doesn't have that energy to it. It feels like you're listening to something that is scripted. There's a lot of podcasts out there, particularly the true crime world, where like you'll have two best friends who like literally will sit there and they'll get ready to do this true crime thing, but the whole thing's scripted, but they don't even write a good script. And then they try to add these little, like, they're supposed to be spontaneous personal bits. Like there's one podcast where they talk about beer and then true crime. So they're like, oh, Jason, did you pick out a delicious beer today? And he goes, yes, it is cold and foamy. Do you like the beer? Yes, it is good. I'm glad. And it's just like, well, that's a well-prepared podcast, but it's trash. Here, we're here to swim right into your ear holes with unrehearsed glory. Is it going to be great? No, but it's going to be good.
No, it's going to be adequate.
You're going to get for free. And I think Drew and I have a proven track record that we're going to be pretty good. And let's face it, gang, so given the material that we're covering and the stuff that we're going to talk about, you will be sobbing. You need to pull the car over now because you're not going to be able to drive later. There's going to be a bunch of salty tears in your eyes. You're going to cry in front of your children. They're going to question your authority. This podcast is going to affect you. So just buckle up, bud.
There is something that, well, first of all, that just falls in line with one of our mantras, which is to, we want this to feel like a comm center. We want this to feel like communications people sitting around a campfire or whatever, or sitting around an actual structure fire.
Sometimes we do start a fire at a barrel right there in the comm center because the commission won't pay the heat bill. So
yeah, and sing doo-wop. So we just want everyone to just kind of relax and understand that we are resourceful just like you, and we want that feel of the comm center. And John, if there's one thing that you and I can promise, and that's it's just adequacy. We can definitely say we are adequate. We are somewhere near average.
I think we're a little bit above that. I think we're doing the typical dispatch thing where we're not giving ourselves enough credit, Drew.
That's fine. Yeah, okay. So we should try to be somewhere just near average. And not give ourselves credit. And not expect credit from anybody.
I feel like this is my performance review, Drew. You are not my real supervisor.
I am your real father. We've discussed this, but we'll talk about it on Father's Day.
On Father's Day, we should have your performance review as a son.
Yeah, wait for a very special comm center on Father's Day. So I mentioned it's Police Week, John, before we dive into what we were going to dive into. And what exactly is that? Because, I've never been, to be honest. I don't know if you've ever been. I know that Dispatcher John, who is our inaugural guest, Dispatcher John, please look him up. He's such a good dude. He's a Midwest dispatcher. I don't want to say where he's from because I don't remember where he's from. National Police Week offers honor, remembrance, and peer support while allowing law enforcement, survivors, and citizens to gather to pay homage to those who gave their lives in the line of duty. This came from 1962. President Kennedy signed a proclamation that designated May 15th as Peace Officer Memorial Day. Peace Officers Memorial Day. And the week in which that date falls is considered Police Week. So apparently, if you go to DC right now, it's pretty wild. I don't want to say wild. I don't think that memorials get too out of hand.
I was going to say, calling it wild kind of gives it sort of a Mardi Gras take. And I could just picture a lot of police officers, lifting up their ballistic vests and showing their vests.
Yes, most definitely. They're vest carriers. But I guarantee there are some pints that are raised at certain, Irish establishments or whatever. I know that I think that like the national FOP, I think it's like Lodge 1 or something like that. I know that they tend to do a lot of stuff for the people that come in from out of town. And look, if you're there, have a great time. Remember the fallen, no matter where you are, but have a great time. Be very careful while you're there. And man, one day we're going to make it there, John. I promise you. We're going to be there with Dispatcher John right in the tent city.
I'm going to get a ballistic vest just so I can lift it up.
Right. You should get a ballistic trench coat that you could just open at times, inappropriate times.
Yeah, I can't wait to be gunned down on Police Week. What a perfect statement for the relationship between dispatchers and police officers.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, it is a terrible year.
Yeah, it's bad. Have you brought? Did you bring up the numbers by chance? Because I will if you.
No, I could do it real quick if you want to just briefly cover like why it's been so terrible. I know that you've been. Yeah, I know you've been posting Joe Gamaldi and things like that.
And I've given my reasons in previous episodes. Like I just again I want the public to understand that it's not a local problem. It's a national problem, but you don't see it on national news. You see it on local news, which is, understandable for certain things. But collectively, I think this is a national problem because we've set ourselves up for this. We've undermined policing, and this is not a woe is me. This is just a leave me alone. Basically, like if you just left law enforcement to their own devices, we tend to weed out the bad ones as it is, and everybody's looking for the bad one. And, that falls right in line with the excerpt from the book that I'm going to read. But, it's just like everybody always wants to find the bad seed, and you're just going to call a bunch of good seeds bad until you find that bad one. And eventually what happens is none of them are trusted. No law enforcement is trusted. Therefore, you don't have to listen to these simple commands like drop the gun or don't point that gun at me. And, it's causing police to shoot. It's causing people to answer the door with a gun in their hand, even though they know law enforcement is on the other side of the door. And it's very unnerving when, we're seeing our brothers and sisters falling left and right. and then you bring a gun to the door. Like, what do you want us to do? Like, really? I mean, do you want us to think, okay, well, maybe they're not going to shoot us, maybe I'm not the next statistic? It's not realistic.
It looks like, according to Officer Down Memorial page, if we are going to do statistics, it looks like we're up to 58 line of duty deaths this year, compared to last year at 137. It looks like we're at least on pace to about match 137 from last year. Statistically, it sounds like it'll wind up being that it's mid-May, we'll probably be around that same number. Maybe hopefully not a statistical increase. Of course, you never know. We just had Charlotte Mecklenburg, in which we had 4 police officers all killed at a go. So but because statistics, they could be so misleading, and you can hear a number like 58 and shrug. Like, I can't punch that number to the audience. I can't make you feel something about 58, and it just makes me feel terrible to contemplate, because 58s are ridiculous. I mean, then 0 is the only acceptable number, but here we have 58. We're headed onto a pace of 137 like last year. There's a war on police officers. Nobody cares. You're not getting any kind of backup from politicians saying, comply with police, save your life, spare their life. There's no reason for these encounters to be happening. You have civil rights. Use your 6th Amendment, use your 5th Amendment, use all of these amendments that are the police are not only going to enforce the law, and they're not only going to apprehend you and arrest you, which is not the end of your life, by the way, but they're going to protect all of your rights. And a society that hates and fears police demands that police protect their rights and arrest everyone else. And there's no understanding for the job, and there's no pity. And it just, to be honest, we talked about it. This was going to be a heavier show, but it just does break my heart, Drew, that 58 people are gone. And, no one at a level of influence cares, right? People are talking about Drake and his rap battle with some other dude, and all this other stupid shit in our culture that doesn't matter at all. And we don't care that the foundation of our Western civilization, law and order, we don't care that that's crumbling, and at the point of a gun and whatever else. I don't know, Drew. I'm rambling. You take over.
The thing that people often forget about in the statistics, and this is what I want to warn you about. Yeah, we're on track to losing the same amount of officers. Here's what gets lost in the wallpaper of all this. Like, last year may not have been a deadly year, as deadly of a year for police ambushes or police shootings. We've still lost X amount of people in the line of duty. This year, it seems like the flavor of the day is police shootings. So executions, murders of human beings, of police officers. In other words, let's just take, for instance, let's just use a round number of 52. So last year, if 26 of the officers that were killed in a motor vehicle accident or some other kind of freak accident, and 26 were shot and killed, neither should be more shocking than the other, because you're losing a human being. We're taking out a mother or a father, a son, a brother, and all the other things that we always say. If this year the statistic is the exact same and it's 52 at this point, what if 50 of them were shootings and 2 of them were motor vehicle crashes? Like, the motor vehicle crashes are going to happen no matter what. But the increase in the shootings is indicative of a less than compliant society. And now, and we've talked about this election year theory that I've had, and that obviously everybody's had. And it's a promotion of lawlessness. It's not necessarily, just I always have doubts or wonders if the government is behind some of these disruptions that we're having. And I don't want to put on the tinfoil hat. I already have a blue roof as it is. So I don't know what I'm supposed to say or what I'm not supposed to say. But I just want to say that if you're, I am a huge fan of the COPS organization website, COPS, Concerns of Police Survivors, because let me share a humble moment with you, John. When I was in the throes of my addiction, of my alcoholism, like, I've been sober for over 15 years now. I've said that before. I'm not hiding that. One of the things that was encouraged to me by somebody that like I know and trust was to attend a victim impact panel of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And what it does is it puts a human face to your what am I trying to say, John? You're like
to your loss, to your statistics. You can
yeah.
just now looking at the Officer Down Memorial page, you still see the number 50 and it doesn't mean anything, but you scroll through the pictures and it means a lot more. It humanizes them.
It humanizes them, and it puts a number to your selfishness is kind of what I was thinking.
Okay.
So you're so selfish that you think you can drive home on Cinco de Mayo, but you're plastered. And then you ram into this car, you broadside a car, and next thing you know, you've taken this bright light that was a dispatcher out of the world. And if you don't know that story, we can talk about it in a minute, but she was on her way to pull her second shift. She was on her way to pull another overtime shift. I've said for a long time that Cinco de Mayo is one of those like amateur drunk driving days that you don't want to be on the road. And she wasn't on the road just recreationally. She was on the road to go pull her second shift. Like she had already done a shift, gone home, took a little break, and now she was going back to pull a second shift, and she was killed.
Just so that we're not talking about her obliquely, just to identify that 911 dispatcher who worked for the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. That was Antoinette Finau. She was on her way back to work on Cinco de Mayo because they were being overrun. She had already worked a shift. She was heading back for a double. Saddest part of that is, of course, that she has a young daughter who doesn't have her mom anymore. That's something that is a loss for her family. It's a loss for her community. She not only had a big heart for the job, but also a big brain. I mentioned yesterday or on Monday, that she probably loved the job. She probably loved it enough to hate it certain days. And it's a loss that shouldn't have happened. It happened because another woman who has not been identified was driving drunk. Something I should have mentioned that day too is that the drunk driver didn't get injured. I always mention with bitter irony that it seems like the drunk driver never gets hurt, but it's like that person also made a terrible choice that has negatively impacted her life and her family's life. Like let's do something on this show, Drew, that we're going to do for the rest of this episode and probably for the rest of all time. But let's understand people without necessarily condoning them, right? It seems like people on the internet, and we'll get to this when we try to boil your blood, people cannot understand someone without condoning them. It's like they don't condone them, so they don't understand it, and they don't treat them as human beings. So a woman went out on Cinco de Mayo. She's probably a normal person, probably, and just wanted to have a good time. Just wanted to have a margarita and relax. And she probably had bad things in her life and stresses, and she made a terrible, terrible, terrible decision. Okay, there's no getting around that. But we can understand her and her life being over and her having to live with the consequences of this as well. Like literally nobody wins in this situation. She's not going to go to prison, and the family of Antoinette Finau is going to feel better. That daughter's not going to have a better life because her mother's killer's in prison, and another family is going to go there. And so I guess what I'm asking for on that is just a little bit of forgiveness, maybe, that we can understand people without condoning them and ultimately reach a place of forgiveness. But at the risk of rambling, one last thing I wanted to say was, Drew, the media and the politicians, you mentioned the tinfoil hat, stirring things up, agitating. We know that, first of all, just the CIA and other organizations they agitate populations for political means. Moving on from that, the news, I remember when we invaded Iraq. I remember when Afghanistan was going on. At first, if you're not cynical like me, when the news comes on and they talk about, how many soldiers were killed in Baghdad today, how many were killed in Kabul, you think, well, it's great that our news media and our country is honoring these fallen soldiers. And in a sense, that's what it is. But it's also an innate criticism on the government, right? Saying that, when we invaded Iraq for weapons of mass destruction that ended up not being there, that all these lives were lost for some political or some abstract cause that ultimately doesn't matter with reflection to the lost life of a human being. We're not getting police coverage of those police officers. We're not seeing their funerals. We're not seeing their flag draped caskets, Drew. We have to go to Officer Down Memorial Page, and we have to dig for things, and we have to have huge atrocities, like four officers lost at once in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, for it to even make a ripple in the news. And so the news is ready to talk about all the soldiers who have been lost in Afghanistan and Iraq in order to make George W. Bush look bad, but they won't talk about police officers being gunned down because, you know, it might indicate some cultural problems that make current presidents look bad. And I don't mean to make this just a strictly left and right issue, but the media is they're always in collusion with whatever the narrative is, whatever the power struggle is. And it's no secret that for years now that the media and the politicians have been anti-police. And so, and you've said this before, Drew, but the media has a very deleterious effect on society because it makes people defund the police. And who is it that is losing out on protections? Victims are not getting criminal investigations. Society is not being protected, and it's because we'll defund the police. Drew.
Yeah, just the only thing that I'll say about that, like, it's you're hitting things that are going to be covered in this excerpt, believe it or not. Like, we literally did not talk about this, and
no, but I'm just you from the past.
So. I'm saying you are definitely we're on the same wavelength as usual, my friend. But you know, I don't want to take anything away from Detective Jonathan Diller, who was taken from us from NYPD. He was killed on a traffic stop earlier this year. But you know what? One of my observations of this thing was, you know, he was elevated in the sense that, and this is how sick and morbid maybe my mind goes, or maybe we are here. This is where we're at, but. He was in a major media market. He was in the #1 media market in the United States. He was in New York. And when somebody from NYPD dies, Dave Portnoy pays off his, you know, Tunnels to Towers is another organization that I donate to that, you know, they paid off his mortgage, but Dave Portnoy set up a fund and made his family a millionaire, and millionaires, not that the money is going to replace Jonathan Diller. By any stretch of the imagination. But what I'm saying is this is happening. It happened 51 or 55. I can't remember the number even, John, other times other than Jonathan Diller. And there's not necessarily the same, like, I don't even know what to call it. It's not fanfare because it really is people pouring their hearts out and just dumping money towards a cause because they feel horrible for this person and their family and for the war on cops. And yeah, maybe Jonathan Diller is the face of cops being killed in the line of duty in 2024. But it's happening all over. It's happening in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. It's happening in Boise, Idaho. It's happening in LA. It's happening in, you know, just you name it. It's happening in Georgia. And you know, this is what I worry about. This is a nationwide problem, and it's not necessarily treated as a nationwide problem at times, especially, you know, when it comes to the media. But there's another hidden problem, John, that we often don't talk about, and that's the blue suicide part of it, where officers are driven because of social pressures or these mainstream media pressures that you just talked about, or even family pressures. And then it's the accumulation of trauma. So I mentioned, you know, look, if the increase in shootings on police officers has an effect on police officers, obviously society, it's a representation of society. Society is becoming more violent. So there are more shootings overall. There are more shootings within a community, and therefore police officers, dispatchers, paramedics, firefighters, people are responding to more violent scenes more frequently. And it's this accumulation of trauma. It's seeing it over and over and over again. It's fighting feelings like, man, is this stuff really just part of the wallpaper right now? Like, why am I not feeling something about this? Because that's a whole feeling in and of itself that people probably just don't understand. People in the civilian community, like, yeah, man, that cop died. And I was a cop for, as John mentioned, 29 years. It was actually 28 years and 11 months because I didn't want to stay the extra month. But, you know, like, I should it used to tear me apart every time a cop was killed in the line of duty. It still does in a sense, but now it's just like so. I don't know how to put it. It's just like I know it's not because of my resilience. It's just because I've just my soul's been worn down to this point. And what that often does is when you have protectors like that, like you, John, like people that answer these 911 calls, only to take scrutiny from people who put us under microscopes. It wears on you, and it wears on your psyche, and it definitely wears on your mental health. And there are times that people just don't want to be here anymore. They don't, and so the suicide rate ends up going up. We had a couple of years ago, we had a suicide rate that was higher in law enforcement than the actual line of duty deaths. It was double. And in fact, it was like that for 2 years straight if you took out the numbers for the flu that was going around.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's kind of what led to this. I mean, obviously there were some extenuating circumstances in the call we're going to break down here, John, if you want to set it up.
Yeah, this is it's almost fitting that we go back quite a few years on this. This is a case from Boulder City, Colorado. This is from April 29th, 2013. This sets up, I don't know, a case study in police officer suicide, family annihilation. But we can look at this case from 2013, and I think it's a little bit easier for us to be dispassionate about this case, or at least not see it through the lens of recent politics, right? Like you could talk about officer suicide. I think his name was Jeffrey Smith. He was one of the police officers who killed himself, who was involved in the January 6th incident in Washington, D.C. And you could say, well, the news talking about that is, some sort of innate criticism on current state of politics. But none of us are really worked up about anything from 2013 anymore. That seems like so long ago, seems like a lifetime ago. But Metro Police Lieutenant Hans Walters, he had been with the police department since 1991. He was a lieutenant in the patrol division of the Enterprise area there in Nevada. His wife was also a police officer. Her name was Catherine Michelle Walters. She went by Michelle. Michelle was also a police officer for Las Vegas Metro. She used to run a lot of marathons, and she had a lot of chronic back pain. She ended up leaving the department voluntarily. Some years before this incident happened, she left in like 2004, I want to say. So she had left a long time before this incident happened, but she had a lot of chronic back pain. And they were getting ready to do surgeries and things like this, and nothing was helping her. She was in pain all the time. And Lieutenant Walters was going through the pressures of the job, such as they were in 2013. None of us, really knows through retrospect what specific things he was dealing with. They also have a son, Maximilian Walters, who was 19 days shy of his 6th birthday. So he's just a little boy. And what ended up happening is that a police officer ended up taking the life of his wife, his son, and then himself. And we have a brief 911 phone call here. It's not long, but it is important to talk about what happened in this case and why, and how it affects the 911 dispatcher who was more or less forced to take the call. We'll play it for you. There's really no room for me to stop and pause it and give commentary on anything, so we'll probably play it all the way through, maybe even once or twice. And I'll go ahead and play it, Drew, with your permission, of course, and then I'll take your immediate takes on it, and then I'll have some, if that's all right.
Yep.
All right, here we go.
And what's the address of your emergency? And what's the problem? Tell me exactly what happened.
My name is Hans Walters.
Mm-hmm.
I work for Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I just shot and killed my son, Max, and my wife, Michelle. And I killed her because she's in such chronic pain from her neck and back and on more medicines than she's not going to survive. And we were both seeing therapists and psychologists in Boulder City. And I feel terrible for doing it.
Okay, and
Please don't interrupt me, please.
Okay.
I've also set the house on fire, and if the fire department comes to my house, because there's a fire hydrant right in front of my house, I'm going to open fire on them. So I have to wait till the house is burning, and then I'm going to shoot myself. Okay? So
okay,
I don't ask me any questions. This is real. This isn't a joke. The fire alarms in the background is because I set the garage and the bedroom on fire. My wife's in the bedroom. I shot her in the head. My son, unfortunately, is in the living room watching Oswald, and I shot him in the head too. And forgive me for my sins. Please don't call back. Thank you.
You're up.
Man, it's so heavy, and reminiscent of something that I actually experienced in a sense when I was running a communications center. I don't. I'll give you a cursory overview of that story because I want to cover that in its entirety. But essentially, the same thing happened. An officer killed his family and then confessed to it, so everybody in the communication center could hear it, and then killed himself. This is so heavy for that dispatcher because, as you know, when anyone calls that's in distress like that, let alone somebody of the profession, all you want to do is reach through the phone and hug them or help them or do whatever you can to stop them from whatever happened. But this is such a shocking and sad story that he's confessing to shooting his wife in the head. He's confessing to shooting his 5-year-old kid who was watching Oswald. And then he's basically telling you, tell the fire department not to show up until this is fully engulfed, or I'm going to start killing them. How do you how does society think that dispatcher should handle that? And moreover, John, how does society think that dispatcher is just in a clerical position to answer that phone call, write that information down, and send it off to wherever it needs to be sent off to?
The fighting part of me just wants to take this and, play it before Congress or somebody and say, like, just to be clear, I'm the same as an insurance. I'm an insurance guy, someone that just takes reports and all that. Like, there's nothing that this dispatcher could do to intervene on this case, but how many 911 calls do we all take every day as 911 dispatchers where we are actively changing the outcomes of things? This is the reason why this case is so tragic is because it was too late to change anything. The course was set at this point. But 911 dispatchers are actively intervening and stopping situations all the time. Suicides, homicides, domestic violence, all kinds of situations. So to answer your question, it's troubling that, we get kind of bound in there with clerks. What's amazing is that the lack of I did find a great deal of compassion out there for this incident, mostly for Michelle and for Max, and not so much for Hans. If you listen to the 911 call, they said that they've been going to therapy. Hans reached out and was talking to people about how he's overwhelmed. He's not okay. A lot of people want to say, well, this is classic family annihilator. This is someone who doesn't want to be dealing with the shame and ignominy of whatever. There's no signs of any kind of financial problems. So often family annihilation comes in with somebody being broke and being found out, someone who's running scams and someone who's overdrawn on their accounts or their credit. Sometimes it happens in the midst of infidelity. Well, we never found any evidence that Michelle or Hans had any infidelity in their marriage. I don't think that this really has those hallmarks. I think this is a man who was just pushed too far, and he couldn't stand to see his wife suffer. He knew that she was not going to get better. I won't say that it was the same thing to do to shoot her, but he did that. And then the part that the text on the screen says unintelligible, but yeah, the little boy was watching a little cartoon about Oswald, the safety conscious octopus. And then Hans knew that, his mom was gone and that there was really no way out of this situation. And then he killed the boy and stepped outside for a brief confrontation with the police department, which did show up. There was already smoke and flames in the house. He resisted commands to put down his weapon and went back inside and shot himself. And it's just how we can view this as anything other than just a complete tragedy for Michelle, Max, certainly, but also for Hans, because, how did he get to this point? This is not necessarily a monster or an evil person. This is someone who was in therapy and it didn't work out. We're always talking about the stigma of mental health problems and making sure you go out there and get resources. But man, the YouTube comments are going to eat this guy alive for being a family annihilating monster. We can understand Hans without condoning him, right? We can understand that police officers with suicide on the rise are facing unique and terrible challenges professionally and personally because they have all the problems that you and I do, common listener. They have all the problems that a person has. And then they have the job on top of that, whether that's responding to incidents like Hans Walter, seeing families annihilated and burned and things like that, and having to carry around these horrible traumatic images and instances inside of themselves and face all that stuff. And they go and they get help, and sometimes help doesn't work.
Right.
I think I would be more critical of Hans if he had not sought help, but he's one of the ones out there saying, I need help. He was someone out there that went out there and did it. And unfortunately, he passed his trauma on to the police officers in Boulder City who responded, the firefighters who had to come put that out, all the inspectors and investigators, but also that 911 dispatcher who, all I will say about this 911 call in terms of its kindness is that it's brevity. The dispatcher's trying to ask questions, probably wants to try to wedge open some kind of something to get him to stop, so that we can preserve as much life as possible, which includes his life. And he's just like, no, don't interrupt me. And Hans is a lieutenant. He knows how 911 calls works. And he's intentionally using his expertise to put a stop to the 911 dispatch process, saying, don't ask me any more questions. Don't call me back. He's saying, I'm just informing you. I'm not requesting services. I'm just letting you know. Don't put firefighters in danger. I want this house destroyed. He probably didn't even want, he wanted the house to be fully gone. He wanted to be gone from the face of the earth. He's not just destroying himself, his wife, his son, but he's destroying the Walters name. He's destroying their memory. He wants all of that gone. And so I have to doubt the sincerity that he would fire at a firefighter with a gun. But of course, suicide and homicide, two sides of the same coin. He already did kill 2 people, so you never know. Dispatchers have to keep firefighters' safety in mind. So probably staging them nearby as police respond. But just a heartbreaking case from 2013, right? And so that was 11 years ago. How many came before that? How many have been since then? We talk with great sadness about police officers being murdered in the line of duty. We can't prevent criminals from lying in wait and gunning people down. We can't prevent people who are felons in possession of firearms and we're going to serve warrants on them. We can't really prevent them from firing back at us, but we can take measures to prevent officer suicide. And are we doing enough? Because all the progressive and good feeling agencies, they say like, it's, if you're struggling with mental health, that's okay. But in reality, we all know that this is what it is. If you're struggling with mental health, that's okay. But don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but get your ass back to work. Sometimes is the message, unfortunately. So I want to call attention to the fact that we have a playlist. It's now its own little podcast. It's 2 episodes that we did called 10 Things That We Want You to Know about Dispatchers. And this is one of the things that I wanted everyone to know and that John wanted everyone to know about. That people often call and give their last will and testament to dispatchers. So this dispatcher that took this call was, well, probably trained a couple different ways and probably ran into a couple different dilemmas. One, this guy's confessing to murder, so let him talk. 2, this guy is giving his last will and testament, so let him talk, but you still want to intervene and try to help him. This just on so many levels, just encompasses the heaviness of what a 911 dispatcher often goes through that people completely overlook. And I think what first responders overlook is this is part of the accumulation of trauma. This is what I talk when I talk about trauma. This is traumatic for her to be an audible witness to this murder, suicide. And arson. I mean, if this guy walked out of there by some miracle, he'd be maybe on death row, and she'd be the star witness at that point. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter if you're a dispatcher, if you're a cop, if you're a firefighter, paramedic. We all suffer these traumatic experiences, and we all suffer them in different ways, some visually, some audibly. And I think it's the lack of recognition of what trauma actually is that is part of our problem. I think that people have to understand that it's a relative situation. I think that people in the profession and outside and administrators have to understand that there are people that have come into the profession that already had childhood trauma that they're dealing with, and that that was unresolved, it was never addressed, and it was never caught in a psychological exam because people have been wearing the mask for their entire lives. And now they get a whole new level of trauma when they start taking these little beatings. I think that previous generations or previous administrations probably thought, oh, look, a lot of them came back from war and went onto the streets as cops or as dispatchers or firefighters or whatever. So they're like, yeah, this is nothing. Like, it is what it is, or, which is the phrase that I hate the most.
I also hate it.
Yeah, it's not what it's not. I mean, it isn't what it isn't. So it is trauma, and it's going to have an effect on your brain. Now, you can say all day long, like, oh man, I've been to 1 million of these car crashes where babies have died, and I've been to shootings and suicides and all that, and it hasn't affected me yet. I still maintain yet, and it has affected you some way, shape, or form. I guarantee it. I know that it has manifested itself in a way that you probably haven't figured out yet. It could be a porn addiction, it could be gambling, it could be something like it could be, they talk about well, I don't even want to get into that. That's for a whole nother show. But
well, denial is a coping mechanism.
Yes.
Just saying no, I'm fine, and moving on. Like, in some ways, like stopping and pausing to acknowledge what's happening to you, that can make you feel tremendously unready to handle what's next. And the scary thing is like, if you admit that something's wrong, it feels like jumping off a cliff. You're like, can I come back from this? If you acknowledge what's wrong, if you deny it, if you say I'm fine, I can move on to the next thing. You actually kind of stay in fight or flight mode, and we've talked about that before with the way that affects you. But I've been through some bad times too, and I know how it affects me: joylessness, depression, hostility. I have gone through periods where I have just been tremendously hostile to everyone around me all the time. And what was the reason for that? I couldn't see it at the time, right? They say you can't see the forest through the trees. But I remember years of my life where I was just unabashedly hostile to people around me, and the people in my life. I would go to work and I would be professional, particularly when I was new as a 911 dispatcher. And I was well known for like my positive attitude and the good energy that I brought to the office. But at home, I was incredibly, incredibly hostile to people. And what was the reason for that? And so I just want to let you know that these things in your life that are affecting you, even if you're not aware of it, others are aware of it, and they may be manifesting themselves in ways that you have no idea. How are you responding to a specific situation? Something comes up and you're just unabashedly hostile. Is that the real you? Only you know for sure. Only the people who love you know for sure. But maybe just stop and recognize that you don't know everything about yourself, and you don't have the proper perspective, right? Everything about you is subjective, and maybe other people are seeing things in you, and other people are being hurt by you, and maybe your professionalism is being diminished, and there's thousands of permutations for how these things could be affecting you. So before you say like, no, I'm the consummate professional, I'm God's gift to 911 dispatching, I'm the best police officer, I was born to enter this role, to step into this gap, to walk in the flames, maybe realize that you're mortal too, and just be sure to count the cost to you so that you're not there too long, like perhaps Lieutenant Hans Walters was.
You're going to get to a point in your life where things slow down, and maybe you retire, maybe you make it out of this profession, either profession that you're in, any of the professions that you're in, and the memories don't fade. And the problem is, now when you're not working, you have time to relive them. You have time to think about them, and you have time to think about the remorse you have for what you could have done or what you should have done to help save someone. I can't stress it enough. I've experienced it. and I'm speaking from experience. So John, if you wouldn't mind, I've got this book that I never wrote. And I have like a collection of, in fact, I should probably will them to you. If anything ever happens to me, John, just get to the Notepad app on my iPhone and publish. But please apologize to the people that need the apologies. But at any rate, I've got a bunch of stuff written in this Notepad that at some point is going to be a book. I keep threatening to do it, and I'd like to read something that I wrote. And my God, you're like so on track with my line of thinking in a lot of this. But this would be a chapter called Managing This. Okay, that's what I would call this. Trauma makes you question everyone's motivation. It must be a part of the fight or flight. I came to this conclusion as I was laying in bed one night, and I was having these intrusive thoughts. And I recalled that my therapist taught me to identify what part was speaking to me and to pull that part out in interview like it was a witness to a crime, and then write it out like a police reporter, like in a journal. So my deeper brain took over, and I began to explore why she thought it was so important that I interview these parts and journal and do all these interviews. And I went down this rabbit hole about how she was pushing me to journal and how she could somehow benefit from my writing and my creativity. And I felt sadness and I felt betrayal that my own therapist was going to take advantage of me like that. And then for a nanosecond, reality broke into my dark brain. And I realized that my therapist is the main reason I'm still here. So I think I finally found the right rabbit hole. This breakthrough came when I realized that my therapist had unwittingly flung open the curtains and let the light in. And she did it with her usual flair, laughing loudly with both of her middle fingers stuck very high in the air. And trust me on this, you really need to find the right therapist. So I use that light to illuminate that I've been doing this my whole adult life. This. My first instinct was to question everyone's motivation, no matter how generous or kind, and just trying to uncover the sinister motive behind it. Like a setup in a middle school lunchroom where you're the only one who's not in on the joke until you realize that you're center stage, that kind of feeling. It's a flawed defense mechanism. I came to realize that this was to prevent me from being a victim of trauma again. It drove me to say inappropriate or less than kind things to people who were genuinely trying to do something good for me or checking on me because they cared. How many times has that driven someone away from me? Is this what fuels my self-sabotage? They were just doing something good because they wanted to do something good for me. I wanted to do something good for me too, and that was protect myself from colossal disappointment or yet another traumatizing experience. The gesture could have been small, it could have been large, it didn't matter. My default was to question everything and find that sinister thread that I convinced myself was real. So how many relationships have I ruined because of this, the defense mechanism? Why am I like this? Running a communication center opened my brain to explore trauma in depth. And as an empath, I took on all the guilt, all the shame, and all the sadness and combined it with my own into a big, boiling, messy pot of hurt. Just as an aside, doing a project on trauma is traumatizing in and of itself. Being removed from your position after giving that kind of effort, well, that's devastating. So I left out that the project was a prerequisite for promotion to captain. Although I knew nothing in life was automatic, I retired as a lieutenant with the realization that it's not your effort or it's not your intent that counts. It's what the person who makes it through the door first and tells them that matters. Loyalty is a 10-lane superhighway that runs north. It's a tiny overgrown footpath that runs south, unfortunately. And it all contributes to this. So navigating through that level of disappointment is like driving a car going down a hill, only it seems like everybody else has a nice, shiny new car and you're on a toboggan. It's very hard to steer and everything is whizzing by, and you're trying to maintain to show everyone that you can do what they can do. It leads to this. Whatever this is to you. For me, it was alcohol. For you, it might be inactivity or gambling. It might be too much shopping or overeating. It might be infidelity or prescription drug abuse, even self-sabotage, where your words fly faster from your mouth than your brain is able to process them. Those are all attempts to escape from this. So in our profession, think of our messaging. Never surrender, never give up, do what it takes to go home at night. We are survivors. We're actually taught what addicts' greatest and worst attributes are all at once. It's survival at all costs. Think of how routine or how superstitious we are. We're totally like that. We don't want to disrupt the routine, and usually to our detriment. I'm here to tell you that you can change. You can change your brain. Clarity, breaking the habits, or maybe even sobriety is going to bring you to a deeper understanding of survival. I'm living proof. I'm living. Look, if you know someone who is losing this battle to this, even if it's you, I need you to be bold. It may not be what you want. It may not be, it's not about what I want either. It may be about what you or someone else needs. So practice something called QPR. Q, question. Are you suicidal? Ask that question. Don't pussyfoot around. P, persuade. Tell them to walk with you. Get them help. And make sure you follow up. And R, refer them to the appropriate resource. Look, no matter where you sit or stand as a first responder, think of our core mission. It's to save people in their most vulnerable moments. So if we can't look out for each other, what's the point? Don't let this win. That's all I got, John.
I think that was tremendous, and it's always funny and slightly unnerving when we see ourselves in each other. I mean, specifically you and me, Drew. I mean, for other people, I can only imagine what it feels like, but it's like you're just some guy down in Florida that I've known for like 18 months. I don't, a year and a half, but it seems like there's just a lot of commonalities between us. But when I hear you talk about when you reflect on your career and the things that you gave to it and the pain that it took from you, I'm not so much of an empath as you are, but I can understand those things, and it's very self-illuminating. So I appreciate you sharing those thoughts with me. It's probably going to take some time for me to process through all that. I hope that the audience is taking the time to. It seems like almost the wrong place for it, right? Like a podcast is something that's meant to be consumed, enjoyed, and then thrown away. A podcast is like a bag of chips, but it's possible that you can listen to a show like this, or you can read an unpublished book like that, and maybe kind of gain some insight. And I don't say that so that you click like and subscribe, and that so you become a member of a Comm Center, but so that you change your life. Like someday after this is all over and I reflect on what my time as a podcaster, I'm not going to care if I made some small amount of money or something. I'm going to try to wonder whether or not I made a difference, right? Because that's what I do with everything. When I think about my career as a correctional officer, what I most wonder about is, did I make a difference, right? In an institution that was there 100 years before I was born and it'll be there 100 years after I die, did I make a difference? Do I make a difference on these 911 callers? Is it better me sitting in that chair than someone else? Well, it's the same thing in this podcast. And so I hope you, listener, that if what Drew just read to you grabbed some of your attention, scroll back, listen to it again, stop what you're doing, maybe have a little bit of self-examination, and see if you can find something that will crack open the door for you. See if you can go down a path, find a way to get through a breakthrough. And more practically, I'll say that journaling helps. I'm a writer. I'm someone that really enjoys writing. It can take different forms. Drew just described it as writing a police report, interviewing a victim or a witness, and doing a police report. If that works for you, that works for you. I was once very upset about a situation, and I wrote a letter and never sent it. That's something that you can use to organize your thoughts. Sociologically speaking, we talk about authorhood, being an author, and how that gives you authority over your problems. You can define them, you can set them out, and just that self-expression, getting it off of your chest, whether with a therapist, a counselor, or just to yourself. Either one of those things is an improvement over just internalizing things and not understanding why your life is going down the toilet and why people who love you can't stand to be around you. So just keep that in mind as you are being a dispatcher, as you are being a police officer, that you're in a minefield. We take it for granted every day, right? Like we go into work and something terrible happens and we joke about it to cope about it to move on, and then we share war stories, where we're one-upping each other, like, oh, that's nothing. I remember the time I took the call from the guy that was on fire. You're like, well, I remember the time I took the call of the guy that suffocated to death because he ran out of oxygen. And we start telling these stories and sort of traumatizing ourselves and sort of also having group therapy at the same time. But we've got to acknowledge, that if you have war stories, you've been in trauma and maybe you need to do something with it. And I'm not currently in therapy. So I say that to you, letting you know that I'm a bit of a hypocrite, knowing that it's probably something that I need to get done and you could do for yourself. And it's hard to do, right? Because we're also like the guardians, the protectors, the strong people. We're Atlas. We're the ones that are holding up the whole world. And to admit that fallibility or that weakness is very tough. And like I said, that feeling of jumping off a cliff, can I come back from that? Can I admit that I'm weak or that I'm hurting and then still go back and put on the load carrying vest or whatever, the ballistics vest, and still put myself in that situation? And I think also just at the risk of typecasting police officers, I think that they often they don't go down that road of self-examination or thought. I think for them, because being a tough ass police officer and everything that the uniform is, the uniform bias, the image that you project, I think sometimes to shelter themselves, they project that back inwards. And to admit that you're weak or you're fallible or that you're hurting or that you're traumatized, that diminishes or mars that image of the infallible or the invincible or the commanding police officer. And so when you lose that self-image too, of course, that's tough. But what happens to police officers who get broken of their position? They get fired, they can't go on, they lose their identity, and they have to try to figure out who they are all over again. And so the self-image for a police officer and understanding themselves as a huge part of career survival. If you can't do it for any other reason, do it for career survival. Do you want to get to your pension? You got 20, 30 years of shit you got to wade through first, man. How are you going to get through it? Are you going to be psychologically armored to do that? Like every day before I was a correctional officer, I used to have to psych myself up to go to work, right? I don't know how it was for you, Drew, but to go inside the walls of the penitentiary, I had to be in the right headspace, because if I was sad, lonesome, depressed, hurting, hungry, anything that was going on with me, inmates could instantly pick up on that, because inmates are the ultimate empath psychopaths. They can pick up on what you're feeling and not care about it at all. But the public, when you're in roll call, your sergeant, your lieutenant, your beat partners, the public that you're interfacing with, the bad guy you've got to chase down, you're psychologically armored up to go in. You do that on a daily basis, but are you doing that for 20 years of your career? Are you psychologically armored to survive 20 years of assault? Because it's not just a battle you've got to get through, it's a whole war. And so I'm rambling, but take care of yourselves. Don't wind up like Lieutenant Walters, because you matter, and because your husband and your wife matters, and your children matters. And at one point, Lieutenant Hans Walters was like this normal guy that people liked, and he was obviously a good police officer and an effective police officer, because he was a police officer from 91 to 2013. He became on the command staff. And so, he was on a track like you or like someone that you like, and then look how it ended. And you can't just say, well, I'll never wind up like Lieutenant Hans Walters, because as Drew mentioned, somebody in Hillsborough County wound up the exact same way. And how many others have been that we're just not talking about right now. So please take care of yourselves. Drew, when do I get to boil your blood?
You can boil my blood right now if you wish.
Okay, let's set this up though for fairness. You and I were joking about this before the show. I said, Drew, I don't know how good this boiling your blood take is going to be, because so many people are just showing outpourings of sympathy, and we got to make sure we got to make sure that we don't do that on the show, because that won't boil your blood, and it'll just confirm what most people are feeling, which is sadness about this case. But
Well,
you
I
and
mean,
I,
it might restore a sense of humanity, actually, that there are plenty of people that not only feel for us or empathize or have sympathy even, but they're willing to say it publicly. Like, there are more, it just seems to me that the haters are the vocal ones.
yeah, they're the ones who are going to get on there and say something. You're right.
Right.
But what's the opposite of boil? I don't even know.
Simmer my blood, John.
Simmer?
Yeah. I don't
think,
know.
I think simmer's just on the way. I would just want to say this though. We also talked about this before the show. People are sheep, right? And when I would look at these videos, because I looked at a collection of videos for comments about the Hans Walters case, because it is 11 years old. It seemed to me like I would see an abundance of sympathy and respect all clustered together, and then I would see a cluster of bewilderment, hate, confusion, outrage. I would see that all clustered together, and Drew wisely diagnosed, so like, well, there's probably moderation going on. Terrible comments are probably being deleted by YouTube channel managers. But also, I think people are generally just going to pile on with whatever they see. And if they see outpourings of support and sympathy and understanding, they're not going to be the one person who chimes in saying, yeah, Hans Walters, what an animal. They don't want to be, it's the same as any other social situation. You don't want to be singled out as the one person that's different. So I guess that's why I also encourage people to be kind, is because people will follow suit and make a better world. But instead of kindness, let's go ahead and boil Drew's blood. And I think I threw a good couple comments in here, but let's also just respond to the process. Like, this is just to give Drew and me something to respond to in comments. And we don't get enough voicemails here, we don't get enough emails, and we don't get enough DMs. So here's some of the things that the internet thinks. This one's from NLOLE, Nlol or something. This is 10 months ago, so this is a recent comment. Narcissistic cop, how unheard of. My take on this initially, Drew, was like, you call this cop a narcissist for killing his wife and his son, and we'll go to court on that, right? Like, we can have a trial of ideas on it. But you sound pretty unsympathetic right now. You don't sound like the height of empathy and lol, Drew.
Yeah, there's a certain vanity in adding comments to YouTube videos. So, hey, I'll hand the contradictory award to that lol from 10 months ago.
This one also the height of empathy. Fuck Hugh too, which this guy's clever.
Yeah.
He says 11 years ago, so long, dummy. Really? Is there anyone who thinks that the suicide murder of the Walters family, that this is the comment that should be out there on YouTube? You want to know why society started degrading to the point where we are now? It's because this was what public discourse was. Like, when our founding fathers said, we ought to talk about governing ourselves in the town square and in the courthouse and in the court and all this. But then when your society is someone that just responds to something like this, so long, dummy, so completely devoid of anything meaningful to say, not so stupid it's not even hurtful, and yet this person's vote counts just as much as mine does, Drew. This is why I've said it before 1,000 times. Democracy just doesn't work.
It doesn't. Not everybody should vote. But so what this does is it's like, okay, so so you're a big bully, you hate cops, okay, we get it. So again, don't you think it's a little contradictory to take advantage of a moment when a defenseless woman who happened to be a cop and her 5-year-old child were murdered as well? Like, so long, dummy. Like, that's the best you got. But as you aptly pointed out, his screen name is @fuckhugh2. So obviously they spent a lot of time in study hall. You know what I'm saying? Or in detention.
And ordinarily I just wouldn't care, but like I said, this person's vote matters just as much as mine does.
Yep.
This person, Jerry Hamer, put out by the Calmness, right? Like that's something we should talk about. We could talk about that somewhat academically. This person, Hans Walter Stiles, 911, says what's going on. He doesn't want to be interrupted with it, which I think is something else we'll talk about, but he gets it all off his chest. I think this has been such a long time coming for Hans, and he had to work up so much, I don't want to say courage to do it, but he had to work up nerve to do it. And once he finally gets there, I think he committed to his course of action and was trying to get through it as fast as possible. Like I said, he killed his wife. His son saw, killed his son. He realized, well, that's it. Let's get the house set on fire. Let's not have any firefighters or police officers getting involved. I'll let 911 know what's going on. I'm not going to engage in the process with them because I don't want to be saved. And so we're just going to get through it. And that's why the phone call is only like a minute long, and he explains every single thing that happens. And so to the common person, he says, yeah, he's talking like he's ordering a pizza. Drew, what's your experience like dealing with, confessed murders and things like that? We talk about affect before. This is certainly a flat affect, seemingly devoid of emotion. But what's your take on that?
Well, we talked a little bit about having empathy, and I kind of have empathy for a guy like this. I mean, he's saying Jesus. He's talking like he's ordering a pizza. Well, welcome to the world. Welcome to the cruel world. this is how people confess to murder and confess and admit that they're about to kill themselves and kill any firefighter that's about to. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it is. You may see that it's mundane or that he's just trying to blap out the information that all this information just because he's been waiting or whatever, and you may see that it's just like he's ordering a pizza. I guarantee after killing two people and about to put the rifle in your mouth, you don't feel like you're just ordering a pizza. You're getting off of, you're confessing your entire life basically. So
To a stranger, yeah.
yeah, so I understand where this guy's like, Jesus, he's talking like he's ordering a pizza, but at the same time, yeah, come sit with us. Come sit in the comm center and listen to what the dispatchers listen to some of the pizzas that people order. Listen to some of the go on a ride along and see how people you walk in and the kids are crying, there's no food in the fridge, and there's piles of clothes and roaches everywhere, and the people are mad at you for being there. Like, just welcome to the world. That's the way the world works, and congratulations, you found it in the safety of your own home on YouTube.
Yeah. This is a guy that has resigned his life. He's pushing in his chips. He's done. He's done with, and he's just essentially saying goodbye. And the thing is that the common person thinks that life works like Law and Order, with the camera close up and the guy finally breaking and shouting, "Of course I wanted to kill him. I wanted it all along," and it's the real people are not so dramatic necessarily. Not that this incident is not dramatic, but this guy's he's just balled his life up and thrown it in the trash can, and he's telling a stranger. Yeah. And this is like Drew said, this guy's last will and testament. This is him resigning his life. It's shocking, but that's how it goes. Here's someone with a less than empathetic take. He feels terrible about killing his wife and son. Poor thing. Must have really been hard to take two innocent people's lives. He showed no mercy. The devil will show him the same. Drew.
I understand the sentiment. I understand what that person is saying. I also can empathize with the lieutenant. You know what I mean? I'm not making excuses for him by any stretch of the imagination. I don't condone that. I don't think that it was wise. I don't think that he maybe realized the amount of pain that he was about to cause by doing what he was doing, and how much shock, because there's trauma, and then there's shocking trauma also, which is a whole different level. But I can understand. I think that this is a natural reaction for someone to say, "Oh, you feel terrible about killing your wife and kid, and the devil's going to show you a thing or two." Like, almost kind of see that that's a natural reaction. I mean, I get it.
I do. I see that as a natural reaction too. But I also see it as just sort of basic. Like this person was on to watching cat videos after this. I'm not sure how much deep thought went into this because, you know, it sort of dehumanizes Hans Walters and where he was at. And again, this guy was in therapy. Like he was trying to solve his problems and he's someone who was unable to solve them. Like he crashed the car. That's what happened to him. And again, just before we continue on, we can understand someone without condoning them. And so I think we understand Hans Walters without condoning him. This one's a good take. The poor dispatcher. This has to be one of the most painful calls she's ever taken. Feeling so helpless had to be terrible. Horrible. Yeah, our whole thing is that we're fixers. We take a call and we're doing something about it. We're sending unit, we're resolving something, we're giving advice, as the case may be. We're changing something, right? Somebody's in a bad situation, they reach out to us for help and we intervene in that. This woman's just taking a report. She's just being advised of a situation. And yeah, she had to carry it with her forever. And I think the only positive thing to say about the call was that it was brief. Drew.
You hit on it earlier a little bit. I mean, she's probably a million things are going through her mind. I mean, you don't have warning when you're a dispatcher. You have a headset in your ear and a tone goes off and then somebody is talking to you and you're talking to them. And then you finish up, you short up and you send it off and then the tone goes off again. You really don't have warning and you don't have choice of who you're going to talk to and what they're going to tell you when they talk. But this is again a different level of this is shock. There's some shock to it, but what I was saying is you hit on it earlier. He identifies himself as a lieutenant, so obviously she's maybe thrown for a loop here. You know what I mean? Like there's probably this awe of rank kind of thing, like, oh shit, like, and she's trying to get a word in edgewise and he's like, don't interrupt me, please don't interrupt me. And she's like, okay, because she knows that she's trying to get the information out of him, yet at the same time she's trying to be respectful of who he is and all this other thing. Like, man, I can't imagine. She's probably living in a surreal, Alice in Wonderland moment.
I'm sure right after it's done, the phone hangs up. She's got a little bit, did that just happen? And then, of course, we don't have time to sit there and wonder and reaffirm ourselves that it indeed just happened. We've got to start moving. And so that's part of how we also fail to process things, is that we don't have time because we have to jump into action mode. And then when it's all over, like you said, the phone rings, we're on to the next thing. And we just persevere and go on. The please don't interrupt me thing said everything about this psychopath. This from... I can't even read out that name. It's so long, it's so far away, but yeah, so he didn't want to be interrupted, right? Is it a power thing, or is it he doesn't want to be questioned on it? It doesn't matter. Like, he's saying this is done, this is over with. You need to know what's going on. Don't send firefighters to save me or prevent the house from burning down. He knows that anything other than that is going to be a delay of what his ultimate aim is. So he's not there to have a back and forth. He's not there to have a tete-a-tete with the dispatcher. And so when he's saying, don't interrupt me, again, I alluded to this earlier, but he also knows the 911 process, Drew.
I don't think that this says everything about this as she wrote psychopath.
No.
I don't think it says, I think the story is told that he was at his wit's end, that his wife was at her wit's end, but she didn't choose to kill herself. She was killed. But this literally, it says, please don't interrupt me, in quotes, said everything. Well, a psychopath is not going to say please. I mean,
no, I was going to say,
shut the F up. I mean,
yeah, I was going to say that I've talked to plenty of psychopaths. They never say please or thank you, first of all.
Right.
But because
again, it's the same. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's the same. I understand the take. I understand. Like, there's going to be a certain level of probably anger, within the public that and it's it may not even have anything to do with him being a police officer. But I understand her take, but I think it's a little off base.
Yeah, please shows consideration for others, which is something a psychopath doesn't have. Cops don't become psychopaths. Psychopaths become cops.
Thank you at Eric Peterson 9161 and all 4 of your subscribers. And I guarantee if we go to your page, we will see nothing but World of Warcraft videos or something stupid. Like you don't have a
it's almost like you're trying to just like I want to get on with my day without feeling what I'm trying not to feel right now. This guy has the most idiotic and stupid take. Psychopaths become cops. Okay, I see. I just wish I could do this. Okay, Eric Peterson, your 911 privileges are revoked. Next time someone's stealing your car or your daughter goes missing, don't bother dialing 911 because why would you invite a bunch of psychopaths to that situation? You could get on the internet and you could talk you could talk with your big mouth, the keyboard warrior, about how psychopaths become cops. But God forbid, someone shatter the window in your car because we all know who you're going to be calling. You're going to call psychopaths that situation because you're not a person of consequence and you stand in judgment of people who do a job that frankly you're not capable of doing based on your reasoning and critical thinking.
Yeah, and you can't type your bravery. You know what I mean? You can't send a message to be brave to whoever you're trying to be brave against. Here's the thing. This is how I normally handle these. When I go in the back and forth with these guys, I wouldn't even engage with this guy. But I used to just say, look, just be honest with me, misdemeanor or felony. And I am telling you 10 times out of 10, they will answer the question in one of the following ways: felony, misdemeanor, or fuck you. I don't know how you know that. And then if that doesn't work, I just said 10 times out of 10, but Daniel Carr came up with another one that I admire and I've used also, which is, so did you fail the written exam? How many times were you passed over to be a psychopath? Because it's either somebody that's been arrested and had a very bad dealing with a cop, or it's somebody that can't be a cop because they were passed over.
I wish all of Daniel Carr's endeavors would fail so he would have joined us.
I wish he was a failure so he could be part of us.
His son was 5, so horrible. What a heartless coward. I don't think he was heartless. That's the thing that's the most heartbreaking about this is that Drew, you and I have both interacted with murderers before, and we know what true psychopathy looks like. We know what true narcissists look like. We have both talked to people who have nothing inside of them that you could call a soul. And as terrible as this situation was, I don't think that Hans Walters had no heart, and I do not think he was a coward.
I don't think he was a coward. I don't want to, again, condone the behavior, but I do think that he did that out of the protection of the kid, as bold or as controversial as that may sound.
That was his rationale. It was warped, right? Like, let's acknowledge that doesn't have a basis in reality. That's not how you protect a child.
No.
But that was what his rationale was.
Yeah. Like he didn't want the kid to grow up without a mommy or a daddy. Plus, he knew that the kid was ruined because he witnessed the mother being killed. So
yeah, which is some degree of empathy for his son, even like we said, although it was warped. I do have a voicemail that I think I have to play it because Bosco just keeps leaving voicemails, and I think he's mad that I'm not playing them. So I'm just going to go ahead and play Bosco's voicemail. He's responding about Amanda Nenniger. That's right, the case that just won't go away. But is a good palate cleanser for everyone who's feeling sad about Lieutenant Hans Walters. We'll go back to that other heartbreaking thing.
Drew, Breezy, and John. I guess we'll mention you too. Anyway, hey y'all, it's Bosco. Got a question about the Ariel Castro kidnapper, and that was a phenomenal episode. Was it just me, or maybe just me being the daddy that I am? I don't believe old brother would have made it to trial. I mean, I wouldn't let him flip his own off switch, because definitely his pronouns would have been was, were. I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe I'm just overprotective father, more like most any other fathers, or even stepfathers, in my case as well. Just throwing that out there, food for thought. Like old buddy at the where was it, New Orleans airport. Anyway, keep doing what you're doing. Awesome. Love y'all. Peace.
Well, thank you, Bosco. Thank you for calling. I get where you're coming from. I think if they had a loving father or a loving stepfather such as yourself, that 2, maybe 3 of those girls probably wouldn't have been in the position they were in. And I'm not blaming them one bit, but I think that's an idealistic look at if they had people to protect them. I don't know that Ariel Castro. I think that Ariel Castro was devious enough to be able to target them because they didn't have a protector in their lives. And if you're wondering what episode he's talking about the Cleveland kidnapping. It's on our it's within our podcast playlist. Go back and listen to it. It's pretty fun. It's a good episode.
Food for thought, reminding me how hungry I am. Folks, if you want to leave a voicemail, call 848-COMM 911. That's 848-266-6911. You can leave a voicemail. If it's germane to the case, if it's thought-provoking, leaves me feeling full, go ahead and leave a voicemail. Let us know what you think about the show. We always appreciate it when you call here. Rumble is a place where you could follow us. If you're watching on YouTube, that's right. You could switch over to Rumble for no reason. I don't know why we even advertise that we're on Rumble, because if you're already on Rumble, then you know that we're on Rumble. But yet we do that. Apple is a great place where you could subscribe and rate. Mike Dutcher at some point is going to be giving a whole box of swag and autographed pictures and artwork and things that I've done because he's left a 5-star rating and review. We always appreciate that. Helps us climb the charts. You can follow and rate on Spotify. I'd like a 5-star rating on Spotify, and you can listen over there while on your drive. Just be careful, like I said, when you're driving and you start crying because of how effective Drew and I are at manipulating your emotions. Make sure you pull over and you drive safely. Instagram's a place where you can reach us at the Comm Center. That's _Comm, the center. You can also, of course, talk more directly to us. Drew can be reached on Instagram at What Say Drew. I could be reached if you felt like doing that at Difficult to Look at Pictures, although so many of you do not feel like doing that, and who can blame you? Because it takes so long that whatever it is you were thinking about talking to me about has long since vaporized from your memory by the time you actually find me. Twitter's a place we exist. On X at Comm Center Pod. We mostly broadcast there. That thing's probably full of DMs that I've never seen before. So I'm sorry if you've DM'd me there, but you really should just be DMing me on Facebook at the Comm Center or on Instagram. Like I said, we have a robust Facebook group over there where Drew is posting things all the time. Fantastic. Drew, what's going on with our monetization? Like we can take super chats. Thank you for all the super chats that we doubtlessly received in the stellar episode. But like, can people become members, or like, should I have discussed this with you off the air? Or
yeah, we'll talk about it off the air because we got to figure out the membership levels. That's what I'm waiting for. We got to figure out what the membership levels are going to be. It's YouTube suggests 2 or 3, and then there are just different tiers that we have to talk about.
All right, fantastic. Well, there'll probably be a Will Crate tier and a David J tier, and we will figure that out so that you guys can get onto those tiers, and a Felony Melanie tier.
Right.
Let's not forget that it's time for Comm Center to get its bread. Folks, we will be here back next week. Thursday, 8/7 Central is when you can watch us on YouTube, and of course, we drop on the podcast after that. We appreciate you guys listening to this episode. It was a heavier one. Next week, I guarantee you will be laughing hysterically, or my name isn't Jonathan Breezy. We appreciate you for watching the show. We will catch you back here next week. Drew, I have nothing more to say to you.
Thank you.